My name is Emma, and for most of my life I believed in signs. That evening the sign was simple. The rain stopped exactly as I climbed out of the metro at sight, and the bridge over the Seine glowed as if someone had switched on a stage just for me. Lucien appeared out of the crowd, coat the color of wet slate, a trace of citrus and cedar on his skin, a smile that made my shoulders straighten. He reached out, and the world clicked, like film slipping perfectly into focus. We walked along the river as he talked about art shows, favorite directors, and how wine could taste of chalk, rain, and peach skin. I laughed because I'd never tasted rain, and he nodded as though I'd said something brilliant. He never rushed me, never lingered too far behind. He listened not only to my words but to the silences between them. It felt like being seen rather than merely watched. Our dates became a string of small Parisian miracles. Cafes with mosaic tables, second-hand bookshops that smelled of dust and cardamom, alleys strung with laundry like secret flags. He wore thin leather gloves and always slipped them off before touching my hand. That small ritual built trust like beads on a thread. "You're my muse," he whispered one night, guiding me into a tiny left-bank gallery. On its walls hung black and white photos, the city in fog, a boat at anchor, a woman's neck caught in window light. "I want you to see the way I see the world," he said. I looked at the pictures and thought, maybe at last someone sees me. When he invited me to move in, just for convenience, I agreed as easily as crossing a street. His apartment was neat, almost curated. Books sorted by theme, pressed shirts in orderly lines, concert tickets pinned to the fridge. He cooked pasta with sage while I cut bread, feeling a quiet drawer in my chest slide open with the word home carved inside. Evenings meant walking hand in hand while he explained why linden trees smelled of honey though surrounded by stone, or how the perfect pause makes music breathe. I thought this was the geometry of happiness, 2 points joined by a line. He spoke of the future as if it were already ours. "My parents are strict but fair. We'll go to Provence in the summer. We'll start something together." He said "we" with such ease that I didn't notice the edge in his phone calls, a blade of tone hidden under fluent French. I told myself it was work or habit. Doubting him felt like vandalizing a masterpiece. The night the invitation to his parents' dinner arrived, I spent an hour choosing a dress, not too bold, not too shy. Lucien kissed my forehead. "They'll adore you. Everyone does." I smiled and believed him. I didn't yet know that doors opening so smoothly sometimes lead not to a home but to a trap, beautifully lit and scented with expensive candles. The estate was older than I'd imagined and younger than it should have been, restored to a kind of museum perfection. Brass door knocker, warm lights, carpets without a single curled edge. Lucien's mother, tall, silver hair swept back, smiled with polished politeness. His father's handshake felt like signing a temporary treaty. They offered me a chair by the fire, champagne that tasted of delicate bubbles, and questions laid out like a questionnaire. "Do you like Paris? What did you do back home? Any plans?" I answered with careful honesty, seasoning each reply with a touch of self-deprecation, and watched his mother nod as if ticking invisible boxes. Then the meal arrived, onion soup in porcelain bowls, roasted duck with orange glaze, and the conversation shifted. They slipped into French, assuming I wouldn't follow. But I'd studied it in college. Each word landed like a nail. Passport, contract, fake marriage. She's naive. Lucien's calm, she won't notice, cut me sharper than the others. I kept my face composed, fingers steady on the glass, but inside the floor cracked open. By the time dessert arrived, my appetite had vanished. I smiled, dabbed my lips with a napkin, and memorized every phrase. The family that had seemed aristocratically aloof now looked like actors in a con. I felt the temperature of the room drop, though the fire still burned. I left the house smiling. I thanked them for dinner, kissed Lucien's cheek, and let the chauffeur drive us back into the city while my mind mapped exits like a cartographer of panic. I needed 3 things: my passport, money, and time. 2 were already a problem. My passport, for visa processing, was in Lucien's desk. My money sat in a bank account he'd insisted I consolidate, so it's simpler for us. At the apartment, he poured cognac. I said I was tired. In the bathroom, I let the shower run hot and loud, sat on the closed lid, and wrote 3 sentences in my notes app in English, then deleted them, then wrote them again in French. If I disappeared, someone would know where to look. I texted the message to an old coworker, archived the thread, cleared the call log. When I stepped out, Lucien was already in bed, phone face down on the nightstand like a well-trained pet. I waited for his breathing to even out, then slid from the sheets. The floorboards kept my secrets. Keys hung on the kitchen hook. His desk required a code. I'd watched him type it a dozen times. Thumb, index, middle, thumb, and my hands copied the rhythm more than the memory. The drawer opened. Passport, a folder of photocopies, a slim black notebook with columns of names and dates. I shoved only what I needed into my coat. Don't be greedy, Emma. Greed slows you down. Shoes in hand, I closed the door behind me and walked the stairs instead of calling the elevator. Outside, the city breathed its winter breath. The river shrugged somewhere in the dark. I didn't run. Running is a story people remember. I walked to the boulevard, flagged a cab with a lifted palm, and asked for Gare de l'Est. In the rearview mirror, the driver watched me the way people watch fires, from a safe distance, with fascination. On the train, I chose a carriage with broken lights and sat by the window. The glass reflected a pale woman with damp hair and careful eyes. When the whistle sounded, I pressed my passport between my palms like a prayer book and let the city slip backward. I didn't cry. Tears belonged to the Emma who believed in signs. This Emma believed in schedules, locks, and witnesses. At dawn, the train exhaled me into a town that wasn't on my bucket list. I bought a cheap prepaid phone, a toothbrush, a gray wool hat. I paid cash. In a hostel with a lurching staircase, I learned the names of the radiators and which ones lied. I put my passport in a Ziploc bag and slept with it under the mattress, phone in my sock, coat on the chair, shoes pointed at the door. I dreamed of doors, of course. Some opened, some didn't. The only one that mattered was the one I'd already used. By morning, the adrenaline had cooled into a hard, usable calm. I bought a coffee that tasted like burned almonds, opened an ancient computer in the hostel lounge, and began to search. Not for romance this time, but for patterns. Lucien's family name pulled articles like Iron Draws Filings, Philanthropy, Endowments, a foundation whose board read like a dinner seating plan. Buried deeper, lawsuits quietly settled, immigration, consulting, photographs of smiling couples who disappeared from social media 3 months after their civil ceremonies. I cross-checked names from the foundation with the black notebook I'd seen for 3 seconds in his desk. I remembered 2 surnames, the shape of a third, and a date circled in red, December 3rd. I found them again in the minutes of a municipal council meeting where a partnership program had been approved without debate. The program's website listed services so vague they could mean anything: facilitation, integration, compliance. Such clean words. They squeaked when you touched them. I emailed myself links from a new account, attached screenshots, saved PDFs to a USB the size of a thumbnail. I made a chronological file and another by category: money, marriages, documents, witnesses. I wrote my own name under witness and felt my stomach turn. I wasn't ready for the police yet. Not without a lawyer, not without a plan. Work kept me alive. I took a shift at a cafe near the station, traded polished vowels for quick hands and a smile. People paid, thanked me, left. No one asked where I slept. No one lied about love. In the evenings, I combed forums where women compared notes on 2 perfect boyfriends. A few messages matched my timeline, so closely the hairs on my arms rose. I wrote to them from a throwaway account. I believe you. I'm going to the press. That was when I met Gabriel. He sat alone at a back table with a notebook full of thumbnails, doorways, street corners, faces made of lines. He asked for another espresso and, after I brought it, for directions to a cheap framer. I'm opening a small gallery, he said, pushing his hair back with ink-stained fingers. Small is honest. I smiled at that. Honest felt like a foreign word becoming familiar again. He returned the next day, and the next. He learned my name only because the manager scolded me within earshot. He didn't ask for a number. He asked if I liked the drawing of the river. I did. When the cafe closed, he walked me partway to the hostel and pretended not to notice that I checked our reflection in every dark window. You look over your shoulder like someone taught you to, he said gently. Someone did, I answered. We kept our secrets like delicate glass, carried carefully, sat down slowly. I told him a version of my story without the wealthy surname. He offered a spare room over his future gallery, a place with a lock only I would have. As long as you promise to tell me if anyone makes you choose between fear and silence, he said. I didn't promise. I'd already chosen. Gabriel's spare room smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. The gallery below was still a skeleton, white walls waiting for art, wooden crates stacked like oversized books. He gave me a key without ceremony. Lock it from the inside, he said. Nobody climbs up the fire escape unless invited. That first night I slept on a mattress on the floor and woke to the sound of him hammering frames, not footsteps coming for me. It felt strange and clean. We built a fragile routine. In the mornings I helped arrange canvases or sweep up plaster dust. In the afternoons I took shifts at the cafe. At night we cooked cheap pasta and shared a single bottle of wine, talking about colors, films, and cities we wanted to see. He didn't flirt. He listened. The absence of performance felt like a luxury. One evening I sat at the window with my laptop, combing through my files. "Who are they?" he asked softly. I told him the truth this time, about Lucien, the dinner, the notebook, the fake marriages. He didn't look surprised, only concerned. "You need a lawyer," he said, "and you need someone who isn't afraid of these people." He introduced me to a legal aid contact he'd worked with during a refugee art project. She spoke to me like a doctor delivering a diagnosis, scary but treatable. Days folded into weeks. The gallery started to look like a real place. My pulse started to feel like my own. But at night I still heard phantom footsteps, still double-locked the door, still rehearsed escape routes in my head. Trust was like a muscle atrophied from disuse. It twitched when stretched, but at least it was alive. The lawyer, a brisk woman named Soline, helped me assemble a portfolio of evidence, screenshots, dates, financial traces, emails. She taught me which documents had weight in court, which were rumors dressed as facts. We met in cafes with no cameras, switched to encrypted messaging, practiced what I'd say if confronted. Gabriel sat with me through each session, sketching silently while I spoke, his presence a counterweight to panic. We contacted a journalist Soline trusted. He listened, recorded, asked for corroboration. If we publish too soon, they'll bury it, he warned. But if we hold too long, they'll erase it. Timing became a second language. Every night I lay awake imagining Lucien reading my name on a leaked draft, dialing numbers I couldn't block. Gabriel suggested we photograph the evidence as art, coded installations, anonymous faces, blurred documents. Hide in plain sight, he said. The idea both thrilled and frightened me. For the first time since my escape, I saw a path that was not just defense but offense. Yet danger crept closer. One afternoon a man lingered outside the gallery, pretending to check his phone. Another day the lock on the back door was scratched. We began using the upstairs window as our main exit, bought a second-hand camera to monitor the street. I changed my hair color again, cut it short, bought glasses I didn't need. "You look like someone else," Gabriel said. "That's the point," I replied. Even as fear grew, so did something else between us. A quiet intimacy built from long hours and small gestures, his hand steadying the ladder while I taped a cable, my voice translating his artist statements into English. We never labeled it. We didn't need to. We were already acting like people who wanted each other safe. It began with a message on my old phone. "We can fix this. Meet me." No name, but the rhythm was Lucien's. Soline told me to ignore it. The journalist said it meant our evidence was hurting him. Gabriel simply watched me read it, his eyes steady. "We're almost there," he said. "Don't break now." A week later the police, using our files and Soline's connections, launched a coordinated investigation. Raids in 3 districts, subpoenas for bank records, quiet interviews with other victims. Lucien tried to get ahead of it, leaking stories about me as a scorned ex-fiancé with mental problems. But the documents were too precise, the witnesses too many. The facade cracked. They arrested his parents at their country estate. Lucien himself slipped out a side door, but was caught at Charles de Gaulle with a one-way ticket to Dubai. Watching the news clip of his arrest felt unreal, like seeing an actor dragged off stage mid-performance. In the courtroom weeks later, he looked smaller than I remembered, his suit hanging like borrowed armor. When our eyes met, I felt nothing but a steady pulse in my throat. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just release. Giving testimony was harder than I expected. Each answer felt like crossing a river of glass. But Gabriel sat in the back row, his sketchbook open, and whenever I faltered, I fixed my eyes on him, the one anchor in a room of shifting tides. By the time I stepped down, I knew the story had finally changed tense. It was no longer happening. It had happened. A year later, the gallery had a name and a reputation. We specialized in outsider art, immigrant stories, unpolished brilliance. In a corner stood an installation of shredded passports and burned letters. My contribution, anonymous but unmistakable to me. Visitors called it haunting. I called it Tuesday, Gabriel, and I lived above the gallery still, though now the mattress had a bed frame and the windowsills held plants. He never asked me to move in officially. He simply made space and I filled it. Our mornings smelled of coffee and turpentine, our evenings of garlic and cheap wine. The fear had ebbed into vigilance, but vigilance didn't rule me anymore. Sometimes women came to us with their own stories of false fiancés, predatory contracts, vanished dreams. We helped them find lawyers, safe rooms, jobs. We taught them what a paper trail looks like, how to say no in a way that leaves a mark. Each time I saw another Emma on the threshold, my hands itched to hold hers, to tell her, "You're not crazy, you're not alone." I still walk by the Seine some nights. The water glitters with the same indifference it always had, but now I understand its language. Flow, not stillness. Movement, not permanence. I don't believe in signs anymore. I believe in exits, and in the courage to take them. But sometimes, when Gabriel brushes paint from my cheek or hands me a glass of wine, I allow myself a smaller belief that survival can turn into something more than survival. That love, chosen freely, can be as quiet and steady as a tide, and just as strong.